with us? Hello. And if we can put the other presentation on the screen. I sent the presentation to Meyer. Thank you. All right. Maybe the previous slide? Or is it the first slide? Thank you so much. So we are still waiting for, can I get some information? What happened to our other panelist, Vivi? Is Vivi with us?
I would say you start and Vivi will join you at some point.
She was with us. Let me check if maybe she's just writing to me. Okay, let me just like connect with her. And then we can maybe start.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, hello, hi. Okay, we see you here. We will have you on the big screen in a second. So we will start in 1 minute. Is that okay? Vivi, there is, okay, we see you. Can you still say something? You don't hear us. You don't hear us. Yogi, you hear us,
Yes,
right?
something.
Okay. Okay, Vivi, you're there.
You don't hear us. I can hear you.
You can hear us. Fantastic. Great. And apparently Yogi can hear us as well. He was smiling.
The video isn't moving for me though, so I don't see.
Yogi, you hear us,
Yes,
right?
something.
Okay. I know. So are we good to go? Okay. So let me welcome you all. Good afternoon. I'm very happy that you are with us here on Thursday afternoon of the second day of the European Data Summit. My name is Karolina Mackiewicz, and I work for My Data Global. You already know Temu, and you've heard about My Data Global a bit also. It was repeated. This name was popping up during the different discussions. And we are very happy to host this session today on boosting the EU data strategy, a human-centric approach to personal data spaces. This day was dedicated to the European data strategy, and we've already discussed the European data strategy and implementing data strategy on so many different levels. In the morning, it was the data. The data spaces were discussed. We learned what the data spaces mean. Then we, of course, talked about the different models of intermediaries. And now we would like to bring another level to this discussion, the human centricity. And maybe I will ask for the next slide, or even, yes, and the next one. And we've heard today the words interoperability as an enable to the European data spaces, also enable of the competition, enable of decreasing the transaction costs. So we would like to explore the interoperability further, and we know, and those who've read the European data strategy once or more know that, of course, the human centricity and interoperability are being repeated there all the time. And maybe just like the question to the audience, I mean, the audience is asking us the question, but the question to the audience, does anyone have any estimation how many times the individual human or a person is being mentioned in the European data strategy? Vivi, who is with us online, she calculated this all, and this is this was published by My Data Global in our blog in February. Anyone? Any guess how many times the individual human person is mentioned in the European data strategy? 0? Okay. Do you have any guess? Ingrid? 5 times, okay. Vivi is smiling. Anyone, any guess? 5 times it's cold. Over 100, okay. Okay, let's leave this now. There were no correct answer here. And interoperability or interoperable, how many times? Very often. More often than human or centric or, yeah, okay. Any guesses? 85 times, okay. All right, do you want to know the answer? So please, the next slide. Unfortunately, no one wins. So the individual, human or person is mentioned in the European data strategy 65 times, and I would like to remind you there is 34 pages of the document. So this means that the human or a person, an individual is mentioned twice on average a page. Interoperability, interoperable, okay, 24. So not that many times, but it's also mentioned as very critical, as one of the big problem, but also one of the key enable. So the next slide, please. So yes, so we learn about the interoperability as a key for exploitation of the data value. Of course, we've heard this already yesterday, today, and there are interoperability issues. Let's not call them problems or challenges. And the next slide. And of course, like we know that the human centricity, as we like, is the key concept in the European data strategy. Interoperability is the key concept in the European data strategy. However, we really don't have the common understanding what all those words mean and how this all should be implemented in practice. And this is what this session is about. So the next slide. To actually understand how we can do it, why we should do it, and also what the business, legal, tech, and societal actors can do to actually boost the European data strategy. And next slide. Okay, forget about that. So let's go to the agenda for the session. That we have to add 20 minutes to that or 15, but let's try to be brief and productive. So if you can put the next slide, please. So I would like to introduce our dear panelists. So next slide. And maybe I will let them to tell us like one word who they are and what brought them here. So, Ingrid?
Okay. Yeah,
I think you need to take the microphone.
Yeah. My name is Ingrid Schneider. I'm a political scientist. I have worked in technology assessment, mainly for medicine and biotechnology for more than 20 years. And I'm now working for more than 3 years in ethics in information technology at the University of Hamburg, the Department of Informatics. And I'm most interested in the governance of data and governance also of the data economy.
My name is T.Dittmar. I'm the co-founder of the Poly Cooperative, which is a data cooperative, pan-European one. And as you saw, I'm really bad at making estimations, as nearly every computer science guy is. So whenever a computer science guy is making an estimation about something, don't trust.
All right, let us bring Vivi to the screen. Vivi, can you introduce yourself and tell us what brings you to this session?
Thank you, Carolina. It's great to be here. My name is V.Lähteenoja, and I'm a special advisor for the city of Helsinki in Finland in the area of data policy. And my academic background is in philosophy. So what I hope to bring to this discussion today are points of view from public policy, as well as the kind of philosophical and ethical underpinnings of those policies.
Great to have you with us. Okay, your screen froze a bit, but not too much. And what about A.Poikola, also joining us from Helsinki?
Hello. Yes, my name is A.Poikola. People call me Yogi. I'm vice chair of My Data Global, the association, and then on my day job, I'm working for the technology industries Finland. So I'm in both on my civil activities and day job. I'm lobbyist for the data and digitalization on the side of human and people on my data, and then on the side of technologies and industries and corporations on the other side. And my bringing to this discussion hopefully is that we cannot just ditch the human centricity and focus on the industrial data, because I've heard this kind of lobbying messages that Europe has lost the game in personal data and there is too much human centricity in the data strategy. Let's cross it over, because it's really so that most of the data sets are mixed anyways, and it will be the best for people in Europe and best for the companies in Europe to do it in the human-centric way. Thanks for having the opportunity to lobby you.
Thank you so much, and yeah, I'm very happy to have all the panelists with me today. As you realize, people who are at this session come from different backgrounds and represent the different perspectives. So we have business, legal, tech, and society represented here, and this is because also in the European data strategy, one of the key there are 4 pillars for action on the European data strategy. One of the first pillar for action is actually cross-sectoral governance for data. So we would like to, of course, also, when boosting the EU data strategy, boost this cross-sectoral cooperation and cross-sectoral dialogue. And I started the session telling you, like, well, the human centricity is central for the European data strategy, but we really don't know, or we really don't have the common understanding what this means. We know that the big fish, they also say, well, we are human-centric, we do what our users want, we follow what the consumers want us to do, so we are human-centric. So I would like to first maybe open this panel by asking my colleagues, but also you, to learn what the human centricity is. So maybe if I can get the next slide. So I would like to, and let me just put this, I have to do a bit of everything here. we run out of the screens for this session. So if you go to, not the panelists, but you all who are watching, and also you in the room, if you have your smartphone or the computer open, you go to the menti.com and use the code 973618 and 5 to enter the well, a survey if you want. And there you will see like the human-centric approach to personal data for me means. I have this here on my screen, so I can show you later what comes out from what you're putting here. But I would like to, start with you. Maybe like, well, business, legal, tech, society, Torsten, what the human-centric means to you?
I would like to answer as a human instead of a businessman.
Please do.
So I guess the first thing that comes into my mind is that this is something I can use without any training. So a system that is immediately understandable for me. And that means for me that it is not introducing any concept, especially social concept, which don't have an equivalent in the real world. And that means, on the other hand, that all important real-world concepts are implemented. So ask yourself, we have heard about the right to forget. Have you ever heard about a system that implements the right to lie? Lying is the verb with the most synonyms in all European language. It is a very, very important social concept, also to protect ourselves. And there's nearly no system who's able to implement the right to lie. The other aspect is that I'm not forced to use a system in a dedicated direction I don't want to go. So for example, we have talked a lot about intermediates. That can be a good concept as long as nobody is forcing me to use this. If I don't want to use that, the system must be as comfortable and as usable for me as with an intermediate. And last but not least, technology should be just a tool. So I want to achieve something with that one, so technology must be unimportant. How I want to use it has to be structured in a way that it fits to my needs, not the needs of the vendor, of the intermediate, the government, or whomever. That means for me, human-centric.
Thank you for your reply, and apologies for not allowing you to put your replies on Mentimeter. I don't know why, but it told me that the voting is closed. But let's see if we can handle this. Ingrid, what the human-centric means to you?
Yeah, it means first and foremost, of course, respect for human dignity and human rights, fundamental rights, values such as privacy, democracy, solidarity, and sustainability. So it's not only about individual rights, but also about collective rights and about beneficial things for the society. And I think technology and the use of data must be based on the needs of people and not just developed and pushed into the market. So there are nowadays many techno-determinist and solutionist approaches, and I think technology should be purpose-driven and not just profit-driven. And moreover, as you already mentioned, it should also be not only for tech-savvy and wealthy people, but also for be affordable, explainable, and understandable for humans with less education and with lower socioeconomic status. And human-centrism is not only directed at the individual, but also at the societal level of social relations. It requires intermediaries, institutions, and regulatory structures which enable informational self-determination. So that's for me human centricity. And I think we will talk about my data or my data operators or PIMS, personal information management systems. And I think the accountability of intermediaries, also the business model, the financing model, and all that matters to enable and exercise informational self-determination or to distort it. So we really should come to questions of how to structure these intermediaries.
Thank you so much. And can we then move to Yogi or Antti? So what about you? How do you see the human centricity?
Yes, so I see it in the context of data. Of course, human centricity is much more than data, but in the context of data, it means for me that we, the people, we can set the agenda on where and how our data is being used. And at the same time, for organizations, the ethical use of data should be always the most attractive option. So it balances these two sides. So I just want to say that going to human centricity is not against organizations in a way. It's just also the practical way. And in My Data Global, we have published the declaration of My Data Principles that highlights 3 big shifts that should happen in order to get to the human centricity. And first of those are that we need to get from formal rights to practical rights. I think both Torsten and Ingrid already mentioned the word rights, but it doesn't really help if we have some rights written in law if there is no practical means of executing those rights. So, for example, in the GDPR, we have a very nice portability Article 20, but where is the button where I can push and get my data? It doesn't exist. Another big shift is that we need to move from the mindset of data protection only to empower people with data. I mean, you can say that people who are in jail, they are very protected. They don't get wet when it's raining outside, and they don't get sunburned, but they cannot do anything. They are closed in the jail. So this can be the same, that if we are super protected in our data with the data protection, we still might not be able to do anything with our data. So protection need to be complemented with empowerment so that people can actually do something, get benefits out of their data. And the third thing that then links to the interoperability is that we need to change from closed ecosystems to open ones so that people can actually choose who provides which kind of services so that, as Torsten said, that we are not forced to go to some particular operator or intermediary, for example, but this should work interoperably so that we can choose the services that we want to have. So those are some thoughts, not only mine, but also coming from the My Data Global. So go and see the mydata.org-declaration, my lead speech.
Thank you so much. And what about Vivi? Do you want to add something or take some other approach to this human centricity?
I think my fellow panelists have done a wonderful job of describing different aspects and also the multitude of ways in which human centricity can be approached from. I did wanted to sort of say that from my point of view, human centricity starts from something that's variously called autonomy or self-determination or self-governance or self-sovereignty. And sovereignty is obviously a big buzzword right now in connection with the EU data strategy, and maybe we'll come back to that. But these concepts of autonomy and so on are deeply rooted in the tradition and the concepts of universal or basic human rights, like Professor Schneider already pointed out. And so for a human-centric approach for me is an approach that makes this concept central, that people have the right to determine without any kind of coercion or compulsion what happens to themselves. And when it comes to a human-centric approach or human-centric approaches to personal data specifically, this for me means focusing on this autonomy of people and importantly also the autonomy and self-determination of groups of people who are involved in the generation of this personal data. So because in our current digital age, I think it can be compellingly argued that the data we are involved in generating is deeply connected with our very personhood. So that's why that same autonomy and right to self-determination, freedom from any coercion or compulsion needs to be extended to the personal data that we're involved in generating. And we are seeing this new wave of digital human rights emerging. And for me, this sort of human-centric paradigm for personal data is predicated on and builds on these human rights. And then just to finish off, I would also like to highlight something that I think Professor Schneider highlighted really well as well, about how this is not just about people, and individuals, so not just about individuals, sorry, I meant to say, but about societies and groups of people, whether or not they are kind of explicit or implicit groups. Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Thank you. And I promised our audience, and if we can keep Vivi and Yogi on the screen together, that would be great. And I promised our audience the opportunity to tell us what the human-centric means to you, and then something is not working here. Is there anyone who would like to add something? Yes? Yes, I think so.
I have only 2 words for it. Yeah? Bright patterns, as opposed.
Bright patterns?
Bright patterns. This is missing the filter here. Bright patterns as opposed to dark patterns. Right? Everybody knows what dark patterns are. Right, because I think that I also love the total scope that was assessed here. I think there was just the design layer was missing, and I think that the design layer here is very important. So dark patterns is design that's used against you to obfuscate and to make you lure the wrong way, actually, by obfuscating what's actually going on in the back end. And I think that bright patterns is a concept that we should think of whenever we think about designs, to go the exact opposite way, to debunk and found like a countermeasure towards the dark patterns that we are circled around.
Right. Thank you. Any opposition? Any like someone who is like, no, this is all? Well, maybe you can tell us later, or we can have a discussion. I don't know if there's any break later, but I think reception was promised, so perhaps then. So maybe if we more or less agree, and of course there are different views from different perspectives, maybe we can then go to this, like, so how to do it, why does it matter, and how to actually make use of this for European data strategy. And of course, again, we talk so much about the interoperability. Yogi already mentioned, of course, the Article 20 in GDPR. Yesterday or today, I overheard during the coffee break, someone said like, yeah, Article 20, that would be a silver bullet. So of course, if we just had that, then everything would be solved. So how to really make it? And also, like, still, like, if I remember different comments from today, Malte also mentioned the My Data Operator white paper and asked, like, was this mentioned already? I think it wasn't mentioned yet, and if you Google out My Data Operator white paper, you get the information that My Data Operators are providers on infrastructure for human-centric personal data management. So maybe I will, and this feels like, okay, is this the thing we are looking for? So maybe I will ask Yogi, can you tell us a bit more about what is meant by of course, we talked, as I said, we talked already about different models for the intermediaries, and we talked about the data trust and other solutions. Can you tell us, like, what's the difference, and what the My Data Operators are about? You were involved in the process of writing this white paper.
Yes. Thanks. So My Data Operators, these are the intermediaries that provide the infrastructure for us to manage our personal data in the human-centric manner. That's the point. And there are existing organizations and initiatives around the world. And I would highlight here the approach that this operator thinking is really kind of looking at the infrastructure part of it. And it's not enough to have only the human-centric infrastructure. We also need to have the human-centric governance. I think Professor Schneider mentioned that already. But in terms of thinking like, how does the world look like? So there is this kind of Lex Informatica thinking that the systems that we are using, they are putting the boundaries, what is actually possible and what is not. It's other story altogether, what is legal, what is not, what is good governance, what is not. But practically, the systems that we are using make certain things easy and certain things hard for us. And the My Data Operators approach is to ask what kind of infrastructure should there be that makes it easy to have the human centricity implemented in the personal data world. And the idea is that, again, we should be protected, but at the same time, we want to be able to use our data. So it's really, I would not like to reduce it to data sharing infrastructure. It's more than sharing, it's really governing the data. But part of that governance is that I can decide where I share my data, etc. So practically what we did, the white paper was written earlier this year, and we managed to find out roughly 50 what we called at that paper proto-operators. So initiatives, organizations, including Poly from Torsten, who is in this panel, but many others that you might be familiar with. And we approached those organizations and asked, what are you actually doing? And there is variance, so there is no one size fits all, but out of those answers and engagement with these organizations, we distilled a basic model that these are the things that if you are providing infrastructure for personal data, human-centric personal data management, you probably do many of these things. So there is identity management, there is permissions, there is value exchange, there are data transmit layer, APIs, data storage, and then support for the governance, audit, and logging. So this is really pretty much the technical part, but it is the infrastructure, and depending on what kind of infrastructure we have, it makes it certain things possible and certain things not. And interoperability is embedded in this thing, because we believe that as if I would get a phone number from one of you, I can make a phone call, and like magic, it connects. I call from Finland, and you answer in Germany, and there are two teleoperators in between, and they figure out how to make the phone call connect. And we haven't seen these kind of interoperable systems coming up lately. We have only the siloed Facebooks and so forth. If I want to send you a message from Facebook and you want to use Telegram, it just doesn't pass. So we want to have these providers of infrastructure that most often they are actually competing companies, so they can compete and collaborate. So they create together something that is bigger than any one of them. So they create a network that can be used for by people to actually get access to data about us and giving access to data about us to other parties. And in order to get to that level of interoperability, we need to start from understanding what are these operators. And following the white paper we opened over the summer self-description process, so we invited these proto operators to submit quite deep study on what they are doing, how they are implementing it. And now we got in the first batch 16 operators going through that, and now yesterday closed the deadline for next one, and we have still one more coming this year. So we have really good understanding now based on the answers, like how these operators do these different things. And that is the starting point for the journey of interoperability, speaking about the same thing with same language, comparing the approaches, and then slowly getting to the level of actually making recommendations that this is how it should be done in order to get interoperability. So that's the operator work in short.
Great, thank you for this explanation. So it seems that we are starting to getting something tangible, something concrete that is actually, like, you know, addressing those needs of interoperability and making or unlocking the data, as it was also mentioned today, in human-centric way. Yogi mentioned that already, like, some companies are on this path, and one of these companies is Poly, represented here by Torsten. I'm wondering, why did you decide to join this path? What this gives to your company? Do you think, like, we also are here, like, thinking about competition? Does this matter, like, to be a human-centric organization, human-centric company?
So I guess competition in the moment doesn't really play a role. You know, I can easily say, hey, there's a company like DigiMe and they're producing awesome software and so on and so forth. So will that harm me in any way? No. Because we have all one enemy in common, or at least some enemies in common, and they're not part of my data. Yeah? So I would say everybody who is now a part of my data and signing that their paper is part of the family. It's not a competitor. Lucky us, we have different approaches to fulfill that role as my data operator. On the technical level, of course, there are some things in common, because otherwise we could not be interoperable. But for example, one company is open source, the other one not. Our company is owned by the users. That's the reason why we are cooperative. Others are owned by classical VCs or business angels. Some have an open business model or not. So I guess all of them will survive, hopefully, and that we will have a very nice set of different operators in future, and that maybe sooner or later the folks from the US are in some way forced by the users to join my data and to sign that piece of paper. So we had earlier today the guy here from International Data Spaces. So I would say, you know, my data operator is the big brother of international data spaces. You know, we are human-centric, so human data is much more important than industrial data. They are taking care of industrial data, and lucky us, we have already lots of things in common. The way how we're storing data, so because sooner or later there will be a bridge between industrial data and personal data. Yeah? So if I'm buying a bottle of shampoo, industrial data gets personal data, because then it's my shampoo. Before it was industrial data of Unilever or somebody like that. There is some stuff that makes me a little bit nervous, but this has nothing to do with my data really. It has to do with the aspect that we have, in general, in that kind of discussions, too much tech guys and too much lawyers into the room. And lawyers and tech guys are very similar people. We are very, process-driven, and so that makes it really difficult to include, let me say, the social aspect, the human aspect, because we are all biased a little bit. And so, for example, we have implemented now our system, which is using trust in a term or in a way that is quite unnatural. So trust is a very, very subjective personal matter. If I'm trusting you has nearly no influence on anybody else. But if I'm, for example, trusting an SSL certificate, that means this is a global trust. So that's something where we have space to get better over time, and I guess that's also a very important part of my data, that we are open to get learnings and to discuss that in that group, which is quite heterogeneous and coming from lots of different countries, and that will make sure that we will come up with a much better solution than all of the folks from the Valley.
Right. Speaking about solution, Professor Schneider, you study in. As an academician, you studied different models of the intermediaries, and maybe like also getting out only like from or expanding this from the my data operators. Could you tell us, or could you discuss maybe or open the discussion of the pros and cons of the solution of this kind, and also thinking from this point of view of the interoperability and then human centricity?
Yeah, I will try my best. I think the My Data community is an important catalyst to really create a community to discuss different models and versions. But it's very much on the one hand on making something an automatic handling of preferences of individual users on the one hand. But on the other hand, it's also to aggregate preferences of users vis-a-vis third parties who want to use the data. So I think one model is somehow the commons model in terms of having data unions or having data cooperatives. And a second model is the fiduciary trust model. And I think the difference between the two is that the cooperative model is very much based on a contract relationship between the intermediary and the individuals, whereas the fiduciary trust model has more obligations towards safeguarding and representing the interests of those data subjects who are to provide the data. So I think in institutional terms and governance terms, I would prefer the fiduciary trust model, which also imposes lots of obligations in terms of having a third party which is independent, which must try to be not neutral but independent and very much directed towards the interests of those people whose data are being given to him or administrated by the intermediary. In that respect, I think the business model is important, the question of who is financing this intermediary. And there might also be a collusion of interest or a conflict of interest if, for instance, money comes into play. So, for instance, Poly wants to monetize data as well, monetize data from those third parties to whose data are somehow given access to. And on the other hand, there's also a kind of promise to give the data subjects some part of the money being generated. I think this might induce poor people or minor people into giving away on disclosing more data than what's beneficial for them. So in that respect, I'm very skeptical about monetization schemes. And another thing, of course, in terms of collusion of interest is also that these intermediaries might be captured by the clients, by those who want to get access to the data. So in that respect, we really need accountability mechanisms, we need certifications, we need some oversight mechanisms as well. And of course, in terms of data, I also think there might be a plurality of preferences what's being allowed to do with the data. So in that respect, we also have to think about a plurality of values, plurality of preferences, and representing these values and preferences, because we cannot assume that there is something like a common view about it. So we might even have something like representatives of different values and different representations of what should be done. We might organize that in different data operators or even within a single one. And of course, another danger would also be that this intermediary would be something like a meta platform. So if it's just a single large one, it might be one who would become the next GAFAM, so to speak. So in that respect, the question is, should we nationalize it? Should we have it sector-specific? Or should we have a cross-sectoral governance scheme? So these are many questions which are still open and which have to be developed forward while developing this community.
Torsten, you raise your hand, but
yes.
Okay, or can we go to Vivi and then to you?
There was, sorry, I have to correct one sentence and then we can go to Vivi. So that is quite a common misunderstanding. We don't want to monetize data at all. What, at least, it's, by the way, it's data sovereignty means it is a decision of the user if he wants to or not. It's not my decision. So the option what we are offering is monetizing something completely different. So our claim is basically stop sharing data, start sharing algorithms. What we want to monetize, or what we want to offer to the user to monetize, is the fact that if we take 1% of the computing power of the smartphones we currently have in our pockets, just in Germany, that would be 50 times more computing power than all supercomputers in Germany we ever bought. So what we are saying is, instead of sending data anywhere, for example, for micro-targeting or whatsoever, we want to help the economy to send the algorithm to me so that I can see what's going on with my data and just that the insight is going back to the economy. And what you will get money for is not handing over your data. It is saying, hey, I'm offering a part of my computing power, so everything will happen under my control and you will just get the answer back and nothing else. So same thing for federated AI, federated big data. I want to build with my colleagues together an ecosystem where data have never to leave my private sphere again for doing all the different things.
May I shortly respond? I think, of course, there's now a lot of buzzwording also about federated learning, about edge computing. It's a new decentralized form of handling data and aggregating data analytics. However, if data analytics is done on my smartphone, it's still not within my control what kind of algorithm is being used, what's being done, what's being inferred of that use. So in that respect, I think it doesn't really matter so much whether it's on my smartphone or whether it's stored. Of course, centralized storage systems have problems on their own. They can be hacked more easily. There can be much more control by governments, for instance, and things like that. But still, I think you shouldn't, the federated learning model doesn't necessarily mean that you have more control just because it's on your own smartphone.
True. Not necessarily.
Thank you. I just have to check. Okay. Yes.
The session at 5:30, maybe 5 minutes later.
Yeah, that was my.
Because Cory Doctor is waiting for us.
Yes, that was my plan. I just wanted to check with Yogi if you can stay with us for 10 minutes. I know that you had some time limitations.
Yeah, I can stay until 5:30. So.
Perfect. Okay. All right. So maybe I wanted to. We already went here and there to the different corners. I wanted still to come back to the governance and ask this question or ask Vivi for the comments. There was also the discussion already. Ingrid mentioned that well we have to think about, of course, governance, on which level this should be organized. Like, is this national level, international level? Would you like to comment on that? Vivi. Okay, we are having some. Is this the?
Was that for me or for Yogi?
For you. The question about the governance, if you would like to comment on governance. Yes, thank you.
Sorry, thank you. Governance, yes. I think it's super interesting. There's a lot of activity going on with these different models for how to govern data, how to govern the institutions that govern the data, how to govern the exchange or availability of data between different types of legal and other entities. And I think it's an incredibly dynamic field that would benefit from a little bit of sense making, because I hear so many conversations about data intermediaries and especially data governance, where it seems that if you ask 100 people what data governance means, you'll get 100 different answers. So personally, I'm maybe most interested in the aspect of kind of governance of governances. How do different models like trusts and cooperatives coexist in the same ecosystem? How does an ecosystem look where I can choose the kind of institution, data institution or intermediary that I want to trust with maybe a particular set of data? So those are my thoughts on governance.
Thank you. Yogi, raise your hand.
Yeah, I just would like to maybe bring this discussion a little bit back and closer to the European data spaces and the data strategy where we started from. And I do very much agree with Vivi that this needs a lot of sense making here. And I think that Europe has the potential of, maybe somebody says that GDPR is not perfect, and it's by no means is not, but anyways, it has shown the path and way on the global level. So maybe speaking of superpowers too much, but in the data protection, Europe is definitely showing the way on global level. And I think the next question is whether Europe could show similar way the globally what it means to do personal data governance. And there I think the discussion gets so messy so quickly. So that's a big problem. And my maybe 5 cents of understanding at this moment is when we started from the operator work, I wanted to say that this infrastructure is a different question of the governance. And when you put the title intermediary, one that is studying it from the perspective of decision-making and organization think that the intermediary is a governance issue. And then the other one who is studying it from the engineering perspective on the connectivity and interoperability think it's an infrastructure question. And it is both of these. And typically, I would claim that people that are looking at more from the infrastructure perspective, the governance comes as a second thought. Maybe after 5 years or so. And the other way is equally true, that so those who think that, yeah, let's put data trusts or commons or whatnot, the infrastructure is normally like a side note. It's like one sentence in the paper that, by the way, there are these PDSs or PIMs that seem to be doing something relevant here. So there is a big mismatch in the conversation between these two levels, and they can be matched very nicely. And I think in the common European data spaces idea, by the way, since I'm lobbyist, I must admire IDSA for their lobbying efforts of getting this word pair of data spaces so prominently to the agenda. But anyways, how do we think of the data spaces? I think we need and must think them in the level of infrastructure and in the level of governance, and try to not be completely mixed in these discussions. They are interlocking things, both are needed. So that's my point here for the development of the data spaces.
Perfect, thank you. I saw some nodding here. Maybe and apologies, I wanted to really like crowdsource your comments and your questions. That was not possible, but I would like you to know that we are very much open for a discussion with everyone, and we invite everyone to the to talk with us, of course, like here, but also on through different communication platforms that my data community is using, which one is, for example, a Slack, which you can join. I will show later our website at the end, and also we organized a conference, virtual conference, in December 10th to 12th, where we invite you all to join and promise that. I will do also, I'm leading this conference, everything to engage you in the active discussion. But now feeling the pressure of time from different sides, virtual and here, I would like to ask my fellow panelists so now we know there is a lot of things to do, messy discussions going different directions, there are some ideas, there are ambitions, there are some tools. But what is one commitment that you on the professional, on the private level, you can make in order to boost the European data strategy and bring this human centricity there? And maybe I will start with Yogi, because in case he has to drop out sharp past. So Yogi, what is your professional or personal commitment to boost the European data strategy in a human-centric way?
I think on the very practical level, I've been now lately hearing more of the international data spaces, the work that is coming from the industrial background. And as my background, as I explained, I'm one foot in the industrial world and the other foot in the human-centric world, and I see these very much complementing. So my idea will be to get in touch with IDSA and understand better where human centricity can help the industrial ideas to make good society and flourish. So I will be in touch with IDSA and learn more about their model.
Thank you. Do you want to pass the ball to one of the panelists?
Well, I can pass it to Ingrid.
I'm an academic, so in that respect, what I can offer is to reflect on certain models or on practicalities. Also, what I can offer is to really continue in entering this dialogue between techie people, nerds, and social scientists, economists, and people from other lawyers, other disciplines. I think that's very important. And this relationship between infrastructure and governance, I think it's important. But I also think I would like to remind the people who are doing this work in terms of being intermediary or opening up this idea of a data space. The question is whether the self-understanding is to be a data broker or to have a self-understanding as a data steward or data custodian. And I think it really makes a difference whether you feel obliged to those who give the data, or you feel more interested in giving the data away to many and giving access to many people or companies and industry. And I also think the collective dimension of data has to be taken into account, because it's not only my data. My data is also, there is data about me and data about people like me. So even if I am not in favor of certain uses of data, other people might unknowingly disclose and give away these data. So in that respect, we have to have a sense of benefit for society and also develop a sense of what might be an abuse of data. So I think this is also something to bring forward in terms of the purposes of data, what's legitimate uses, what's illegitimate uses. And of course, this is very much context specific. So there cannot be general answers, but I think there are some historical lessons also to be drawn, to be careful and to really be cautious.
Thank you. Do you want to pass the ball Do you want to choose? To Vivi. So Vivi, your
Thank you.
professional commitment.
Okay, so I work for the city of Helsinki, and in this digital strategy for the city of Helsinki commits it to the human-centric My Data principles, and to contributing to the goal of the European data strategy, which is putting data to good use for the benefit of people and for societies. So in this spirit, the city is committed to making its data the most usable and used city data in the world by 2025. And this is my professional commitment is to help further this cause.
Thank you. So I understand we're passing the ball to Torsten.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Thanks. So I guess the best commitment you can make as a business person is to accept challenges. So what Ingrid was, for example, just challenging one of our core theses. Maybe these thesis is right or not. She don't know, I don't know. And what my data will make sure with these concepts, when I'm wrong, that the users we have until then are not locked in. That they can leave the sinking boat and say, hey, was nice with you, Polly, but that was a complete failure. We will go now somewhere else. And that's a good news. It's a good news for me as a human being as well. So on the other hand, we have that competition between IDS or my data. I don't see there any competition at all. They are covering two completely different aspects. And they have something in common, and that's great. So for example, the way how data is stored and how interoperability will be handled and so on and so forth. So I'm really, really proud of both initiatives. So first of all, my data did an awesome job, and the folks from Fraunhofer driving the IDS did also an awesome job, just on completely different aspects. So that makes the whole thing stronger together. And yeah, I guess we should not get divided by being competitors.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for your commitment. I've heard a lot of words about collaboration, dialogue, talking with different parties, with different partners. So I hope this dialogue will be fruitful. And just about the My Data operators, there will be, if I remember correctly, the second release or announcement on 14th of October. So this is actually like less than 2 weeks from now. So we invite you all to follow. So maybe if I can just ask for the last, okay, we are in the last slide of my slides. Nevertheless, mydata.org, you can follow us also on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and of course on our website, sign for our newsletter to just learn more of what's going on and what those people from all around the world are brewing there. So thank you so much. We maybe didn't answer all the questions thoroughly, but at least now you remember that the human centricity is a key central concept in the European data strategy. So let us keep us working for the common good. Thank you so much.